And we're live. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the very first episode of MarksWood 35, where we're going to talk about all things photography. The bearded gentleman over here is my co-host, Joseph Wood. And hello, are you excited? I'm pretty pumped.
Very excited. We're going to finally record this and finally get it done after already somehow being flagged by Google as violating community guidelines.
I know. All we did was name the video, and then we got a message that said it was inappropriate content. So go figure.
That makes no sense, but
I know. So I'll let you go ahead and kick it off if you want to introduce yourself and go over some of the cameras you've used and stuff and how you got into photography and all that good stuff.
So I'm Joseph Wood. I'm currently a social media coordinator at my church. And before that, worked in retail with you, doing Apple retail. There's my dog. And I did Apple retail total for about 6 years, 3 years at an Apple store, and then I did 3 years at a third-party Apple place that shall not be named.
Exactly.
With you, and that's where we met in 2012. And I am not a professional photographer. I am a hobbyist. I love doing it. If I could get paid for photography, that'd be fantastic. But as of right now, I do not, and not really trying necessarily. Although the majority of being a social media coordinator seems to be taking photos. So
yeah,
that is a big part of what I do. And he's just like, what's going on?
He wants to be famous.
He does. Yeah, he's still a little hyperactive from the brownie he ate.
Yeah, I still can't believe it's crazy that he didn't get sick at all.
I thought for sure he got into my wife's purse and got a brownie that she had got from me from Shane's, and it was huge brownie. I thought for sure he'd at least be throwing up, and he has done nothing.
Wow.
Strange. He's a super dog. And so I got into photography when I was actually started getting into it as far as like really wanting to take photos and take better photos. I'd say when I was around maybe 14, 15.
Mm-hmm.
I think a little bit after we moved to Atlanta from Nashville, Dad got me his old Nickermat film camera. I had a 51.8. That was the lens that I used on it, and taught me how to load the film in there. I got it right maybe half the time, and so it was pretty much like a guessing game on if I loaded the film correctly. And so it's like I wouldn't get too attached to the pictures I was taking because I wasn't sure if they're gonna like show up or not.
Yeah.
So when you take them to Walmart and they send it off and get it developed or whatever, half of them would come back just completely black, and they're like, didn't come out. I'm like, all right, whatever, we'll try it again. So and then I got my first digital camera 2001 before I went to Israel. I was at a private Christian school, and they were going to Israel, and I thought that'd be cool. And so parents got me a Sony. I was trying to figure out the model it was. I could not figure out what it was, but I think it was around a 4 megapixel. It was hot stuff at the time.
Yeah.
Hot stuff. And so, but then when we hooked up in retail and we started talking about cameras and stuff, that's when I got really back into it. And that's when I got, let me go to my list here, the Sony HX100V, which is a super zoom camera that they have that's really good. And I think now it's like up to the HX300 or 400V or something like that.
Yeah. And
killer video, 1080, 60 frames per second. Really, really good. Zoom was good.
Wow.
JPEGs were good.
So that was a fixed lens. So it was super zoom?
Fixed lens, super zoom. Yeah, 30X, which now like their super zooms like 64X or something.
Yeah. Wow, that's actually pretty impressive for one of the fixed lens super zooms to do 1080 60. That's actually really
cool. It was crazy. I'd never seen 1080 60 on a camera, and it just looked ridiculous. And so it was great, and I loved that, going to the zoos and being able to zoom like right up to those animals. Their JPEGs were good. It didn't shoot in RAW, which I didn't really care for at the time because I wasn't really doing a lot of post processing. So, but it was good. I liked that camera. But then I kind of outgrew it and moved into the NEX 5R, which was great. Still one of the sexiest cameras I've owned.
Yeah. Again, I will say one of the sharpest cameras I think I've ever seen you own too. Is the files of that thing were so sharp.
It was really, really sharp. Yeah, it was really, really like that camera a lot. And some of the pictures I've taken from that are still some of the best ones. I took it to a Braves game, got some really good photos there, and brought it to work, got some really creepy photos there of Steve.
I remember that.
Because that was because it was like that had the lens or the LCD screen that you could flip up so you could see yourself, and so you could do like a little selfie shot.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and so that was pretty cool. I actually used that quite a bit. But that was a good camera. I like that a lot.
That'd probably be a good camera for vlogging. All the vloggers that do that, because it's got that flip up screen. You just turn it like that, and
it was pretty good. But the lenses at the time were just so expensive because Sony had broken into the scene and they hadn't really exploded like they have now, but their lenses were just, they didn't have a lot. I think they had like 8 lenses total, and Sigma had just started. I don't even think Sigma had any of their lenses out for the E-mounts. And so like the 51.8 was a good $550 at the time, which was as much as the NEX5AR cost.
Gosh.
And so I was like, that's just not gonna work. And so then I bought the Sony A37, which was a great camera, a DSLT translucent lens, and that was cheaper because they use Minolta lenses.
Yeah,
because they bought Minolta, and so you could use all these really old Minolta glass. And so I got this 51.7 lens, which was like my favorite lens ever, and insane chromatic aberrations. You could see it in all the photos, and it was still just really great depth of field, and absolutely love that camera. Did you ever see that one?
Yeah, I did. You brought that one into work a few times, I think.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that one was the one where you were, I think both of us had finally realized that the EVF was usable on that one compared to a lot of the other ones, because that one actually had a decent EVF. And I mean, compared to today where they have put like 2.6 million dots and all of them there, but it was actually pretty good. It didn't lag very much. I was surprised.
Yeah, and because I had only used EVFs up to that point. Well, because the NEX5R did not have any type of viewfinder. The HX100V, I think, had an EVF, and then the A37 had EVF. So I had only used EVFs at the time, and so I was hooked on them. And but I decided I wasn't going to buy many more lenses for that, and maybe I wasn't going to do professional photography. So then I'd scaled back to the Canon HS50XS. Just the most ridiculous name for a camera. That was another super zoom that had gotten the marks of being like the best super zoom at the time that you could get. And so I got it and I hated it. It was a piece of junk. Not saying that it is a piece of junk, but for me it was. I just couldn't either utilize it the way that it should have. I hated the Canon's menu system. I'd never used Canons before, and the video was not very good in that camera.
Yeah.
JPEGs were horrible in that camera. And I had that camera for like a month before I was like, this thing's a piece of junk. And ended up selling that. And then I feel like maybe I had a camera in between here, but I don't think I did. And then I got the D3300, the Nikon D3300.
Yeah.
Which is one of my
Wait, didn't you have a you got some Sony that you said that Walmart shipped you like 2 of them?
That was after the Nikon.
Okay, gotcha. All right. So next was the D3300.
Yeah. I feel like I had another one in between there.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think I did.
But
I feel like there's a camera I'm missing for some reason. But the D3300 was great. The only thing that was annoying about that was I just want my 51.8 lens. Like that's what I want with every camera I have, is just a 51.8. Which now I realize I really want a 35 1.8, because a 50 1.8 is really like a 75 1.8.
Right.
So I got to stand like 100 feet away from someone to get like a really good portrait of them, and which is really annoying for the most part. And so the Nikon D3300 does not have autofocus in the body, so I would have to buy all autofocus lenses, which cost more, and so that was annoying. And so I have a 51.8 that my dad doesn't really use that much, and he gave it to me to use, but it was all manual focus. So I was like, well, that's annoying.
Yeah.
And so then I went to the NEX3N, which had just dropped $200 down to $299, and that was another Sony, and that was the one that Walmart shipped me twice.
Yeah.
And, didn't really care that they did that, so I sold one to my mom, And both those cameras have worked their way around my family. I sold one to my sister. I sold that one to my mom when I ended up saving up for the A6000 that the church ended up buying me to use for social media. And so I ended up buying the 51.8 Sony lens for that. And now my brother has the NEX3N, and then my sister. So yeah, he's using it when he's on the trail. So
very cool. Yeah,
that'll be good for him. Better than his iPhone, even though his iPhone takes amazing pictures.
Yeah. Does the 3N have Wi-Fi or NFC so he can use it, so he can like pop over photos to his phone?
It does not.
Okay, then.
No. So it might have. It doesn't have NFC. It might have Wi-Fi. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't think it did though. I think they that was the one that they kind of withheld a lot of that from.
Okay.
But it still has their crazy sensor that they have. No viewfinder, no touchscreen, which I don't really care about.
Yeah.
But it's tiny. The thing is just absolutely tiny. So, and now I'm on the A6000, which church ended up buying me for social media. And I've got the 51.8, the 16 to 50 power zoom kit lens that it comes with. And then I got the 55 to, I think it's 210 zoom for it. So I'm rocking 3 lenses now, which is the most I've ever had.
Very nice.
With a camera, and I pretty much only use my 51.8. So
yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah, I mean, in this day though, I mean, this with all the technology and megapixels getting higher and higher, you really don't have, like back in the day. I remember there's so many people that had like 20 lenses, like, you know, they had a different prime focal length for like every situation. But I mean, with 36 megapixel, 40, even 24 megapixel cameras, if you crop in a little bit, I mean, it's not a huge deal. So
yeah, software is so good now that you can do it all software side, and you can do all sorts of tricks to do it. But yeah, it's I'm what I've called a portographer, where I don't have as much money. I have a fair enough amount of money, but we're using it for other things. Photography has never contributed to my salary or anything like that. So I've not needed to pour money back into it if it's not making me money.
Right.
And so I try and get that's why I've been so obsessed with fixed lens cameras. So I'm like, oh, one lens to rule them all, you know, and just put it on there. And so, but luckily Sony's prices have come down, and you can still get some really good digital cameras for super cheap now.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks to KEH. Pretty much everything we buy is from KEH.
Yeah.
I live in Georgia, so it ships like really quick.
Exactly. Yep. I went to I returned something from KEH, and I went to their headquarters, and it's in like a tiny little office building, and then like it's like so tiny to go in, and then you go in and it's like the most narrow little hallway. You go to the desk, and then when you get to the desk, there's this huge like factory behind them where they have all their stuff, and it's just like, oh my gosh, there's cameras everywhere. Yeah, pretty cool. KEH is great. And I find that their rating system seems to be really accurate on like good or bad quality used stuff. Sometimes you'll see places say like it's a 9 or something, and 9 out of 10, and you'll get it, and they'll actually be like a 7 out of 10 or something. That KH is pretty good on rating their stuff.
Yeah, I got the A37 from there, and it was like excellent instead of excellent plus, and I was a little nervous, and I got it, and it was like no flaws in it whatsoever.
Yeah, they're good about
probably
that.
A good time to mention our first sponsor of the show, KEH.com and
and Apple.com and all right, so yeah, maybe one day we'll ask them to sponsor us, because they do business in the Atlanta area. So who knows? Maybe they'll.
We could also get more sponsors.
Yeah. All right, so as for me, I got into photography. Let's see, when I was around, I think like 12 or 13. And I was always the one in my family, and even extended family, that always wanted to document like the family get-togethers, the Christmases, the birthday parties, vacations. But my mom was always the one that like loved the memories. Like she loved looking at pictures and having them, but she didn't really enjoy taking them. And so my dad kind of misunderstood that and like bought her all this nice camera stuff and was like, here, now you can make these memories. And so she had it, but she never really learned how to use it. She never really did use it. So I told her it was so interesting to me that I could make something to make other people happy by looking at. It was just, that whole concept was so cool. So my dad was working for Bank of America when I was like 12 or 13, and we spent a year on the road traveling from Georgia all the way west, almost to the California line. And one of my favorite places to stop along the way was the Grand Canyon, and the first camera that I ever used on that trip. So that was my mom's film camera. It was a Canon Rebel EOS 2000. It was a 35 millimeter SLR. And I think, like you were saying a few days ago, it very well may have been that it just came out in year 2000 and every camera was named 2000.
Every like movie, video game, anything that came out, it was 2000 because it sounded like futuristic, you know?
Yeah. Even the Backstreet Boys CD, Millennium.
Right.
I will say that.
Listen to that.
Yeah. No, I never listened. Of course not. I never listened to Backstreet Boys.
Of course not.
Anyway, so it came with a kit lens, 28 to 80, 3.5 to 5.6.
So I would like to see more cameras now come with a 28 to 80.
I know. It's a very, because now it's all either like 18 to 55 or like
always 18 to 55.
135 if you pay a little more.
Yeah.
So 28 to 80. And then I think we also had, because that would have been a cropped sensor. It wasn't a full frame. I don't think it was a full frame film camera. I think it was cropped, I believe. But so that would have also come, I think, with some kind of, I think it was like a 10 to 18 or something. So she had a wide angle with it too.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it was 28 to 80 and some kind of 10 to something. And so I used those all over the Grand Canyon. And man, it was such a cool trip because for that whole year, I was lashed onto that camera. We were buying film in every single state and just stocking up on it. So that was cool. So I used that. And then that was kind of the year where I discovered that I loved photography and I wanted a camera of my own. And so that next year for Christmas, I got a Canon PowerShot S3 IS. It's a super zoom. Yeah, it's a little. It looks like a mini DSLR basically. It had image stabilization. It was 6 megapixels and a 12x zoom. So
is that the one? I feel like maybe that might have been the one that Andre Agassi would promote. Do you remember? I don't know why. At some point, Andre Agassi started promoting these power shots, and it would like take pictures of him like swinging in slow motion, and it was like
it very well could have been. They're still making the Power Shot series. There's been a million of those things. So yeah, that was the Power Shot, and at the time that was like Canon's top. Like it was like if you didn't want to go point and shoot, this was like at the top of all the point and shoots when you got into this like bigger body style. So I thought I was freaking professional walking around with this thing that had this pull-out screen. I could flip it up and down. So it was pretty cool. It did 480p standard definition video.
Hot stuff.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So shot with that for a while. And then I want to say maybe another year later, I moved to Nikon, a Nikon Coolpix. I don't remember the exact model name. I just remember it was a Coolpix.
Took really cool pictures, didn't it?
Really, really cool pics. Yeah, very.
Man.
It was 8 megapixels. So a bit of an upgrade from the 6 megapixel Canon.
What year was that?
I think it was, let's see, maybe 2003 or 4.
That's a good amount of megapixels for the year. Right.
So I moved to that because I think I got this for Christmas, but it was around Christmas time when they were, when all the camera companies throw their commercials up and all the latest and greatest stuff. And before moving into like an actual big DSLR type camera, this was a really good point and shoot. But what really caught my eye about it was that it had all of the technology and specs of the Canon that I had, but in this like tiny package because it was a point and shoot instead of like a DSLR, big type. And so even then,
so that was a little point and shoot thing.
Yeah, it was smaller, but it had better, which is typical of Nikon. It typically, better sensor, better low light, just kind of naturally better.
Those little Coolpix, man, those things sold like hotcakes. I remember one Christmas, like everyone in my family got a Coolpix.
I know. Well, yeah, because there was one Christmas where they released them in like pink and orange and blue.
Yes, we got that, and Costco sold them, and like everyone got it. Yeah.
Yep, definitely. So yeah, they were the doorbusters of Black Friday, like that, like hardcore that year. So shot with the Coolpix for a while. I liked that one. That one I actually was pretty happy with for a while. I shot with that one for probably another couple of years. I
would love to see you shoot with a point and shoot now.
Yeah, well, so I'll touch on that in a minute because I actually just from the time that I've talked to you last, I received a very some hate comments on my YouTube channel from somebody. So I will I'll address that in a second, and I'm actually going to be doing something to address this person. So and it has to do with me shooting with a crap camera and making good pictures out of it. So Not anyway. Nikon Coolpix point and shoot, 8 megapixels. It was a good camera for a while. I loved the size because I literally just always had it in my pocket. Like if I went to the grocery store, or me and my wife used to go play putt-putt a lot when we were dating in high school, and I would just always have it everywhere, and I would take pictures of everything. So
that's the RX100 right now that makes it so attractive to so many people.
I know, man. That's a killer camera. The new one shoots in 4K now too.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's wild. So that just shows you how far technology's come. It's amazing. So then after that, I want to say maybe a couple of years of shooting with that, I finally got my first DSLR. Went to a Wolf camera that opened up, which they're out of business now. Yes. But they opened up not far from my house. I went there and got a Nikon D80. And that was an actual DSLR. It was the first camera, first digital camera I've ever owned with interchangeable lenses. And so that was cool to have that, ability to be able to see what different apertures, how they affect the picture. Because I still, even at that time when I got the D80, I still hadn't really grasped the concept of like what aperture and shutter speed do and ISO. I pretty much always they come out of the box on that little green friendly auto button, and I just leave it there and rock on. So on this one, I kind of started experimenting a little bit, got a little better. And then not long after I got the D80, I ended up upgrading pretty quickly to the D90 because this was one of the first Nikons that had HD video. Yes. So I was going to Dragon Con in Atlanta, which is a big sci-fi convention where all the nerds kind of gather and meet sci-fi movie stars from Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. And so anyway, I had heard this year the cast of Harry Potter, a lot of the cast members were going to be there. And so I was just bent on getting this D90 so that I could take some video as well as photo. So I stopped at actually a Wolf camera. I think it was like on the way to Dragon Con. Got this thing and just hoped the battery was charged, started shooting with it. And I had no clue that you couldn't autofocus in video like you could with your photos, where you could just, hear the beep and then it's just good to go.
You can autofocus at all in video there, right?
Yeah, not at all. I mean, I think you could like
autofocus. It just wasn't autofocus at all.
Right, exactly. Now, I think maybe, I don't remember. I think maybe if you had it like on a tripod and you held the shutter button down halfway, it would like stutter and lock focus. But the second you moved, it would throw it off. I mean, it would never keep focus. There was like no actual continuous autofocus. So I cranked it in video and I held down the little shutter button until the box went green, and I just like pointed at everybody, and I was like, man, I'm going to sell this stuff to paparazzis. This is going to be great. And then I got home, I popped the SD card in my computer, and it was just completely blurry. Like nothing was in focus because I didn't know that you had to turn the ring. And so I was devastated. Of course, at first I was like, Nikon, I'm gonna switch back to Canon. Come on, who does this? But it was just a user error and I was an idiot. So that's when I knew. That's kind of probably my defining moment where I knew I had to learn how to use these cameras. It was just pointless to keep spending money upgrading when I was leaving it in the automatic settings. Yeah. So after that, I upgraded, probably another year down the road, I upgraded to a Nikon D300. And that was the first Nikon I ever owned that didn't have any auto setting at all. Everything was manual. So you had to set your metering mode manually, your white balance manually. Everything was, shutter speed, aperture. So that's when I actually finally just sat down and got on the internet and really kind of taught myself how to go through the settings. And I made a bunch of bad pictures before I finally started seeing how to use the settings. So I spent some time doing that. And that's when I would say I finally started getting the mindset of, hey, I can actually, take my time and take a picture that people might want to look at versus my personal work. So I think when I got the D300 is where I kind of crossed this line where I said, well, I'll have my personal photos and then I'll start making some like really cool, like professional photos.
So were you doing any photography for pay at this point, or was it still mainly just for pleasure?
Yeah, at this point, when I got the D300, I was not doing any paid stuff, but I was doing stuff for free by my request. So I would like get my friends and my cousins and say, hey, let me know if you guys want a free photo shoot of your any couple that I knew. I would ask if they wanted something for free because it gave me portfolio work and it helped me learn.
Did that creepy at all when you were saying like, hey, can I like take pictures of y'all?
Well, yeah. Well, that's why I stayed with friends and family, because
that would be weird.
Yeah. I mean, it was a little awkward for all of us at first because I since I had never done it and I was still kind of learning the settings, I was sitting there talking. I was like talking myself through it. So I was like, click. And, when you give your camera a funny look, people are going to think, oh, crap, he thinks I look bad or I look fat. But, so I'm like, click. And I'm like, oh, it's on F16. And they're like, what is he doing? And they're like, what does that mean? Yeah. So I was terrible at communicating. Most of the time you're supposed to just be like, all right, great, good job, good guys, good. And you just, work your camera on the fly. But I was just like, oh my gosh, what is this? And yeah, so I wasn't necessarily good then, but I was starting to just experiment doing a bunch of that kind of work. And when I got the D300 is when I started loving shooting outside, just landscapes and waterfalls and anything I could. So I wasn't doing anything paid at that point, but I knew I wanted to. I had found the real love and passion for it. So once I had pretty much mastered the D300, which is when I was, I think it was about a year before, maybe 2 years before I met you, I got the D700, which is my first full frame.
Yes.
And that just opened up a whole new world for me because I still had Nikon cropped lenses. And I didn't know that you needed full frame lenses. And so I put them on and my 18 millimeter was really like a 10 millimeter. It was like so wide. So it had that black ring around the sensor and it was only usable between like, I don't know, 20 millimeters and like 22 millimeters. So I had to start getting better lenses. And I realized that full frame cameras do amazing low light stuff. And so at that time, I spent a couple of years with the D700 because I owned that one and then kind of added more cameras into the mix. And at that time is when I started getting paid to do a bunch of couple stuff. Like I did a bunch of engagement shoots and I did some high school reunions and stuff. So I did just basic event stuff, nothing crazy. I didn't do any weddings then yet. But then but I knew I wanted to. So then I added a Nikon D3 as a second camera to the D700. And that was the full body camera that went brand new for like $6,500. Jeez. And I got it used like a couple years old for, I think, like under $2,000. So I got it for a really good deal.
Was this one of your Craigslist deals?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm the master of Craigslist.
Little like crazy Craigslist deals where you like meet people that are like, I don't want this new car. You may have it for $12. You're like, all right.
Yeah, that's how I got my Ferrari. I traded a guy a pack of Skittles. So
there you go.
Yeah. So the D3, D700, I rocked that for a while. And then I started shooting some weddings and mainly just friend referral stuff. I didn't have like a website and anything crazy at first. But I started like at that point, I would call myself a pretty knowledgeable photographer from the standpoint of, I felt comfortable getting paid because I thought my work was actually getting professional. I could deliver really, I was proud of what I was delivering. Yeah. So then at that time, I met a guy through church that did a lot of video stuff. And he needed a partner, really soon to take on all this video stuff with like some local business commercials. And he wanted to make like some YouTube short films and even some videos for churches. And so I started thinking, well, if he's making money doing video, maybe I can, jump in with him and we can do that. And so that's when I moved to Canon. I moved to a Canon 7D and a Canon 5D Mark II because I had always, at that time, Canon video was hot. It was everywhere.
Oh yeah. Everyone was talking about Canon.
Oh yeah, I mean that they would market. Oh yeah, the last episode of season whatever of the show House was shot on the 5D Mark II, and it's like they don't mention that it's a $40,000 lens that was on the 5D Mark II.
Right, of course. Yeah.
But so I got the 7D and the 5D Mark II, did a bunch of video work, and made some money doing video for a while. I didn't do photography for a little while, so I just did some personal stuff for fun, like landscape stuff. But I was doing mainly video. And then I realized after editing the video, for hours on end versus photo editing that I hated it. I just did not like doing video editing as much as I like doing photo editing. Yeah, and to each their own, but you have to enjoy it if you're going to sit there for 6 hours and stare at footage. And I just didn't enjoy it as much as I did, making photos look nice. So
I did a lot. Yeah, I did a lot of video editing too at our church and for schools and various things. And if you don't like the source material, if it's not interesting to you, then it's like grinding just to get through it. Whereas with photography, it's still a little bit more of a game because I don't know, it just seems a little bit better.
Yeah. That's a good point. Because if you get like, even now with photography, if I get paid to go and like, I don't really do events anymore. I do like real estate, interior design stuff, architecture, landscape. But if I, every once in a while, if like a friend pays me to do, like, for example, this last Christmas, I did a Santa photo shoot for my church that they just asked me to do. And,
it was that sounds a little weird.
Oh yeah. Sorry. So the church
dressed up as Santa.
No, so the church invited in. They paid a Santa Claus to come in for the kids, so that way the kids could all line up and tell Santa what they wanted for Christmas and all that. And they needed a photographer because they were going to give out the photos for free. So I just did that as a favor, and they paid me to do that. And it was, I enjoy doing things like that for people, because my family goes to the church, and so they asked me to do it. And some of my family even works on staff there, so it was great to help them out. But when it comes back to, I put them all in the software and I have 300 pictures of kids sitting in Santa's lap, you just don't enjoy that as much as you do for personal stuff. So I think that's true with anything, but at least it's easier to do that than video work. It can be just more daunting if you're there.
You can set up a preset for a photo and then basically apply it to all the photos.
Yes.
Knock out 300 photos in 20, 30 minutes, whereas in video, you have to sit through hours and hours and hours of footage to pull something down to 3 minutes.
Exactly. That's how it is. So, so then once I realized that, I wanted to get full blown back into photography. And since I had already bought the Canon 70 and 5D, I had already had Canon lenses. So I just rolled with those two cameras and just kind of used them for photography instead of video. And they worked for a while. And I did another year of shooting on those, I believe. And by that time, I think that was probably the year that I met you, that we started working together. So then, because when I met you, I was still shooting Canon, I believe.
Yeah. I want to say yes that you were. Yeah. Because I know at one point you switched back to Nikon, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. I've owned so many cameras, it's hard to keep straight. Yeah. So then I ended up basically doing all my photography on that. I did all my professional stuff on the Canon rigs, and then I moved up to a 1DS Mark II and a 1DS Mark III, which again are the Canon full body $6,500 cameras when they were new, but I let them get 2 or 3 years old, got them used for a couple grand, and then upgraded to the 5D Mark III when it came out. The main reason I upgraded to that is just because it was about time that the successor to the 5D Mark II came out, because it was years and years later, and it had the only thing that was crap about the 5D Mark II was the autofocus. It had 9 autofocus points, and it could only focus, I think, at -1 EV. So it was in the dark. It just couldn't see anything. It would constantly hunt. So it did that, and then you talked me in. You texted me every day about the Sony stuff. One day you were like, "Dude, Sony just came out with a full frame mirrorless camera." So of course, when you text a guy like this, that Sony comes out with a full frame camera.
I live vicariously through you. So if I want a camera, I convince you to get the camera. And and at the time I had Sony, so it's like if you bought a new lens for Sony, we could use the new lens for Sony. So
that's right. So basically, you just took advantage of me, and I found a way to buy it, and I got the Sony A7R at that time, which is 36 megapixels. It was just an awesome camera. And then at the same time, and I didn't buy that right when it came out, but I bought it, I think, when it was maybe about a year old. And then I bought the A7 Mark II at the same time. And I took those two to my last Disney World vacation, and they performed great. The only thing I hated about that was the battery life. Because when you're on, when you're in Disney World or in any kind of theme park all day long, you shoot a lot of stuff. And so the batteries, I could maybe get in the high 200s, so maybe 260, 270 photos before the battery crapped out.
Yeah, I mean, that's when the disadvantage of going to a smaller body is you have less area to put a big battery in there.
Right.
And so it's like they got to either figure out a way to compensate with software or something, or do they even have a battery grip for that?
They do.
It's all third-party stuff, though, right? There's no
Sony makes one, but it's $400, so it's pointless. Yeah, I mean, it's just, you might as well just stick another battery in your pocket. It's just
you can probably buy 4 batteries for the
exactly. Yeah. Now one thing I'll pause here and say surprisingly, the Sony a6000 still does not have a battery grip that's made by Sony. They have like some third-party stuff, and you have to plug in what looks like an 1/8-inch headphone cable from the battery grip.
Yes, I've seen that.
Yeah, it's so just weird looking. So, yeah, it is. So there's like no actual contact points on the bottom to do an actual battery grip.
No.
Which I'm surprised, because they market that one as like, oh, if you're a sports photographer and you want to, stay in a good budget, use this. But as a sports photographer, you're probably going to be using bigger lenses, and so you'd think they'd make a grip for it to increase the battery life, but they didn't. So I really loved the A7 II. That was the first camera I ever owned with in-body stabilization. I think it was one of the first cameras to ever have that in general. Yeah. And I know Olympus was doing it before Sony, but then they did it. And so basically the sensor was on like a gimbal. It just like shifted as you moved, which is it's mind blowing to think about how they do that. But that was great. I was shooting a lot in Disney World at like 1/6 of a second handheld, and it was sharp, which is just mind boggling. So ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, because normally you want to stay at like 100th of a second when you're handheld, at least. So after that, when I got back from that trip, because Sony naturally, I don't know why, like it seems like they release a new camera every 10 minutes. Like,
they're always, it's like Android phones. There's always a new one, like every couple months there's something new with a new flavor. And
it's
tough because it's like by the time you go to buy a new one, you're like, oh, I bet the new one is like right behind this one.
Exactly.
Wait out. And then their old one, whenever the new one does come out, drops like half the price, I know. And
it's a bad problem.
It's
yeah. So then I ended up trying out the Sony a7R II. So at that moment in time, when I got back from this Disney World trip, which was September of 2015, I had a Sony a7R, a Sony a7 Mark II, and a Sony a7R Mark II.
Now, you lost a lot of sleep over that A7R2 on whether you should get it or not.
I did. I texted you I'm surprised you didn't just stop responding. I would just send you texts like, Joseph, just tell me what to do.
Because the guy at the store had one for you. They were hard to find at the time because they had just come out, and like all of the big photographers had like kind of been promoting it. Trey Ratcliffe was obsessed with it, and like, and so you were like, I've got one if I do it, and I was like, I don't know.
Yep, it was very tough. So I got it, and I owned that one. What?
Life is hard.
Oh, I know, man. Yep. So I got that, and I owned it for 2 weeks. And at the time, so I had those 3 Sony cameras, and I had 4 Zeiss lenses. So I thought I was like on top of the world. I was obsessed with the setup. It was great, and everything could fit in that little the messenger bag there. So my whole kit could fit in there. I didn't need big backpacks anymore. It was great. So the Sony a7R II, I pretty much just used that for 2 weeks because I wanted to decide, if I wanted to keep it or not. And I think what I told you was I do a lot of long exposure photography, especially doing bracketing at like night. I can get exposures up to like 3 minutes on the end of the HDR bracket. So I was shooting at a local park doing some sunset bracketing, and my longest exposure was getting up to like 10 seconds or so. And after a long exposure, it would just sit there. I mean, really, even a couple second exposure, it would sit there, and the screen would just say processing, and it would just stay on processing. And I just waited and waited and waited, and it would finally throw up my preview. And so I Googled it, and it said, well, it might be that you have long exposure noise reduction turned on. And so I looked at that, and I did. So I turned it off, and it helped things by like maybe 2 seconds. Didn't really do much. And so I called B&H Photo, who I bought it from, and I said, have you guys been having any complaints about this or anything weird? And they said, yeah, a lot of people have been returning their Sony a7R2s. I was like, well,
is it possible that the people that make Aurora HDR made the software for the A7R2?
Now that you say that, it makes me wonder.
A link here between launching Aurora and then, man, imagine if you were shooting long exposures using that and then trying to throw them into Aurora for some reason.
I can't even imagine. I mean, even just trying to throw 36 megapixel files into Aurora, and especially if they're raw photos. Oh my gosh, man.
For those who haven't used Aurora HDR by MacFun, beautiful app. I use it for some of mine. Gorgeous app, great interface. Takes forever to pull in exposures and merge them. And it's just,
It's very painful. Basically, if you're going to throw in 3 raw files at any megapixel size into Aurora HDR and you want to do any moving, just go start like the first Lord of the Rings movie and then come back and it'll probably be done.
Yeah, because even Trey Ratcliffe, when he's demoing it, someone noticed that he's pulling in JPEGs.
Yeah.
and he's like, it just works faster that way. And it's like, when you have to do things to make the software work better, that's not a good thing. The software should conform to you, not you to the software. So
that is right. Which really surprised me because Trey Ratcliffe seems like a very like Apple-esque, simple, fast, he just wants it to work kind of guy. And that's why I believe that he moved over to the mirrorless system, because he just wanted smaller, simple technology. And so when I saw that his name was on this MacFun Aurora thing, I was like, dang, this is going to be great. I'm going to get it and play around and see what happens. And I was just, my jaw dropped. I was like, is this seriously? So I actually reached out to the MacFun support, who I think sent me over to Stuck in Customs support, which is Trey's website.
So they were like, screw you, go over to Trey and bother him for a little bit.
Exactly, yeah. Because I got an email back from somebody at a Stuck in Customs email, and I just told him, I was like, look, here's the raw files that I used. I sent him a download link to it because he asked for it. And I said, this is what it's doing. I've tried it with multiple raw files, like all different brackets, and it's still so slow. What do you recommend? And so the technical support team said, we find that if you shrink the Aurora HDR window as small as it'll go, it should be a little snappier. I'm like, wow. Why would you optimize Aurora HDR for a 27-inch iMac 5K Retina display and then ask me to shrink it down to like this?
That's like the car equivalent of like, just kick it a couple times, or
yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Just do one of those, hit it real hard and it should come back on. You're like, yeah, that's fine for now, but
yeah. Well, and since then, and this was I don't know, a couple months ago when it launched, they come out with updates fairly frequently, and it's still, I don't notice anything. I don't know what the updates are doing. It's like they're like, hey, let's have the minimize button change from a darker shade of yellow to a lighter shade of yellow. Here, let's update the software. And it's like, I don't know what they're actually doing.
It's a memory hog. Whenever I have, like, Lightroom's not bad. It's fairly good. I've got a 15-inch Retina 2012 model, 8 gigs of RAM, 2 video cards, and when I open up, the other day I was doing it, and I told you, it all of a sudden when I was using it, out of the middle of nowhere, my computer's like, your startup disk is almost full. And I was like, what? I had like 11 gigs. I've got a lot. I should have more. But and then I closed Aurora, and Daisy Disk just showed my storage space like getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I was like, holy cow. It was using like at least 5 gigs of storage space for one exposure that I was doing, which is ridiculous.
That is crazy. Yeah, no, that's just not right. The way they process their stuff is just insane. Yeah. So yeah, that's our opinion on Aurora. So to end it on me, after the A7R2, I basically just realized that it was too buggy for me and it was just not fast enough. So I switched back to Nikon, and I am now and still happily on Nikon. I went to the Nikon D4 and a Nikon D810, and now I just have the D810. Because Nikon released the D5 and D500, and I'm trying to decide between the D500 or something else as a second body, because I have to have a second camera. That's just the way I'm built. Like, I have to have something to back me up if I'm, if my current camera craps out of me somewhere. So I love my D810. That's the favorite camera so far that I've ever owned. It's the best compromise between good low light, great high resolution, fast focus. It's just got it all. So, yep.
You seem happiest now with the Nikons than you ever have.
I am. The best thing. Well, and they're still Sony sensors. So I mean, that's a great thing, because Sony's great image quality. But the best things about the Nikon are that the dynamic range is ridiculous. You can crank the shadow slider up in Lightroom, like all the way to 100, and it's going to pull out every bit of detail out of the shadows with like no noise at all. That's the best part. If I did that with Canon or not Sony, but Canon or any other brand that I shot with, if I just cranked the shadows up, it would just be nothing but color noise in the shadows.
Yeah.
And Nikon is so clean with that. So, yep, very happy on Nikon. And you're currently still on the A6000 with the 3 lenses, right?
A6000, love it. I still use my iPhone 6S for a lot of stuff too, especially being social media if you don't always have your camera. And sometimes when you're taking pictures of people at events, when they're not used to getting photos taken of them, sometimes even though the A6000 is still fairly small and doesn't intimidate them at all, sometimes the iPhone's just a little bit easier. And so it takes, and Sony, I believe, designed the lens system that's in the iPhone. It's like a 5 lens setup that Sony created or something like that. So I still use that a lot. But obviously the A6000 just takes great photos. So
very cool. So before we wrap up, is there any camera right now on the market or that there's rumors of or anything that you're particularly excited about or that kind of, makes you want to buy it or pre-order it or something?
Yeah, well, no. I mean, I can't afford any of them. But if something happened and I got money, if I won the Powerball and I could afford any camera, because I told you I've always been obsessed with a fixed lens camera because I've always just wanted to have like one lens and on a camera. And just I read an article, it was like a couple years ago, where a guy, he was pretty young, he was like 20-something, but he had like $10,000 worth of gear and was obsessed with, how the photographer that like you read on like DP review forums that are obsessed with, you never have the best picture or the best gear. You always got to get this, $7,000 lens or this, whatever. He was one of those guys, and he sold all of it and bought the RX1. And he said he's never been happier.
Wow.
Ever since. Yeah. And so I'd say the Leica Q is the one that sort of just came out that just looks sexy.
Yeah.
It looks awesome.
I mean, it's a Leica, man. It's a Leica.
It's a Leica, and it's a good one. Not that their new ones aren't good, but it seems like their digital ones have really just, like in the film world, they were like, can't be beat, amazing glass, amazing everything. And now that they're in the digital world, it seems like for their equivalent cameras that are like they're competing against, they just can't match them.
Yeah.
Design wise, nobody matches them for the bodies. They all look great.
Right.
But yeah, they've been kind of pretty lame for their digital ones as far as value for money, I guess. And the Leica Q seems fairly, I mean, it's $4,000, but for a full frame Leica, that's not that bad.
Yeah, for a Leica, that's not bad.
For a Leica, that's not bad.
No.
And I like that. I think I like that lens better than the RX1s. The RX1 has a 35 f2. I think that's on it. And so the Leica Q has a 28 1.7. And that's pretty,
That's
pretty hot.
That is pretty cool.
I would kill. There's that. And then I also want and I should have looked this up when I was telling you, and let me look it up real quick. Zack Snyder, the director, has a Leica that shoots. It's a digital.
Yeah.
That I think this is it right here. Yeah, and it's the Leica M monochrome.
Okay. Yeah.
And
so it shoots in full black and white.
Black and white. It's digital, and it just shoots in black and white. And he's taken a couple photos on it, and we'll probably put the links to the photos he took in the show notes somewhere. And it is just it's amazing black and white. The photo he took of Ben Affleck, it was the first shot that he took of Ben Affleck dressed as Batman next to the Batmobile. Looks insane.
Man.
It is so cool. And so that would be a nice one to have.
Yeah. I mean, it's a Leica. I don't think I've ever heard someone not buy a Leica who hasn't said who hasn't said something like, I'm gonna go trade my car in to buy a Leica, or I have to sell my house first and then I'll buy my Leica. Yeah. So yeah, for a $4,000 Leica, that actually is pretty exciting. It's not bad at all.
If we can get Leica to sponsor our show.
Yeah, there you go. Then
they do that a lot. They sponsor no name shows frequently.
Well, okay, that's something to look into.
They're the brand of the people, as they've been known.
Very cool. Well, yeah, this is episode 1, so maybe they'll see that we're super new and they'll sponsor us for episode 2.
That's my goal, to mention Leica in every episode so we can sponsor.
We'll ask them if they can sponsor our show for a Leica giveaway, and then we'll just take the camera and give it to us.
We'll enter the giveaway.
Yeah, exactly. Can you just give it away to us? All right, so
what about you?
Yeah, for me, well, I know me and you were talking last night and saw that Pentax had just come out with their first full frame DSLR.
K1.
The K1. Yeah. So
Talk of the town right now.
Yeah. So I am probably right now kind of leaning towards seeing how that plays in the market. I don't really know if I'm particularly interested in buying it or pre-ordering it right now, but I am excited that Pentax has now introduced themselves into the 35 millimeter market and at such a good price. They're $1,800 for basically the same specs that I have on my D810, except for less focus points. They have and they have more specs. Actually, they have the first DSLR to do the 5-axis image stabilization, like the Sony. 36 megapixels, huge native ISO range, like 100 to 204,000. So I'm pretty excited about seeing the reviews on that. I just want to see, the regular places, the camera store, Digital Rev. I want to see Kai get a hold of the Pentax K1 and see what he says about it.
And you wanted to get out there and get their first few kind of software updates once it comes out, because inevitably there's going to be some weird thing that they just couldn't catch until thousands of people are using it. And so
yeah, so that and I was listening to, I was reading somebody's post on DP Review. And DP Review is saying that they don't foresee there being a lot of quirks as far as like ergonomics and like cosmetically stuff, because they said it's taken them so long, like they're just now introducing themselves into the full frame market, that they hope that they've been spending all this time looking at everyone else's errors and kind of making themselves better from that. So I guess we'll see.
Weather sealed, it's weatherproof. I mean, it's like,
and for under $2,000.
Yeah, their bodies, from what I've been reading on the comments, apparently their bodies are like you could throw it against a brick wall, and it's like, nothing can happen to it. And it looks like someone said that they think it's using the same 36 megapixel sensor that Sony used, and it's probably in your Nikon, possibly.
Yeah. Well, so the A7R sensor was in the Nikon D800E. That was the one right before mine. The D810 is a little different. I don't remember exactly how, but I think the Pentax is probably using something like that, because I mean it's the exact same megapixel count. They're marketing it as no anti-aliasing filter, which is how they marketed the Sony. So it's very possible. But yeah, I'm pretty excited to see that one. As far as a camera that I'm excited about and possibly buying would be the Nikon D500, which is the crop sensor camera that they just came out with. At the same time they came out with the D5, and it's got like all of the D5 features almost, but instead of $6,500, it's $1,900. So it's got 153 focus points, and since it's a crop sensor, they're saying that those 153 points actually cover edge to edge on the sensor, so it's like the whole sensor. So yeah, I'm excited about that one.
Now how does that fit in their lineup? So they got like the D3000 series, the D5000 series, the D7000 series.
Yeah. So this is
up above that.
Yeah, it is. So this is what's so weird. So the D300, which is what one of the first nice DSLRs I owned. Okay, that came out a long time ago. I want to say 2007 maybe, and then in 2008. Maybe 9, they came out with a D300S. So it's like just a little bit upgraded from the S. And that was a crop sensor body. It shot 8 frames per second. And that was pretty much the best crop sensor Nikon at the time if you wanted a cheap way to do wildlife or sports or something. So the 500 is actually a successor to the old D300S. They just skipped the 400 entirely and went to the 500. So yeah, so it's above all the 3000, 5000, and 7000 series.
Because those are more of like their starter kind of.
Right. Now, I would say the D7200 though, out of the 7000 series, that's a pretty killer camera though.
It is, yeah, because that's where they because I noticed when I got my 3300, the thing that upset me was that between their 3000, 5000, 7000 series, they kind of withheld certain features, obviously to try and get you to get the biggest one, but all the others cameras around the 3000 series price all had in-body focus motors, and they didn't. And I was like, oh, so so like 11 focus points, and it wasn't the best for low light focusing or video focusing. So but the 7200 I've heard, I mean, at least up until now, with the 500 is like the best choice for people as like a second body to their full frame if they want a crop sensor wildlife or some kind of fast action camera, because the thing with the way Canon was kind of ruling that market was
they have their Canon 7D Mark II, which is their successor to that older one, and that shoots 10 frames a second and has crazy autofocus. And so Canon has always had this great option of getting a full frame that's like nice and slow but high resolution, but then they have a killer crop sensor body that's fast action and well. So pairing the two cameras are great. And Nikon hasn't really had that in the past few years. They haven't had a great complementary crop sensor camera to go along with your full frame. So now they do. So we'll see how it does in the market.
You're gonna buy it soon, you know that, right?
Probably. Literally the only thing that's holding me back is that it's $2,000 for a crop sensor. That's the only. I don't.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah,
but I mean, if it's the system you're using and you could use all the same gear pretty much for it, then it's like it's ultimately going to save you money because
right.
You know, because if you bought the Pentax, you'd have to buy more lenses for it. You'd probably have to buy more batteries for it. You know.
Yeah,
so.
that's what's holding me back about that because I have this budget in mind that I don't want to spend any more than, and I there's no way I'll be able to fit like another camera and all that manufacturer's lenses as well. Because I really don't want to spend more than like around $2,000 for a second body, and there's no way I'll be able to get a Pentax plus all the Pentax lenses for $2,000. So I'm probably just gonna stick with a Nikon and see what they do. Although there's another photography show in Japan at the end of this month, CP Plus. So they're gonna be
going to that.
I think so. Yeah, I think Digital Rev invited us out. So
we'll get our people on that.
That's right. Yeah, we'll get our people. We'll get our editors on that when they're watching this video. So yeah, so that I'm curious to see if Nikon's gonna, because they just did the D5 and D500, but they didn't do anything on the D800 series of things. So I wonder if they're gonna release a D820 or like a D900 or something there.
Oh, okay, so that's their full frames.
Yeah, so that's what I'm waiting. I'm kind of holding off right now to see if they do that because they might release a successor to my D810 and do like a 50 megapixel sensor, which would be awesome for me because I love resolution. So
if it was the same sensor you have, but it records 4K, which you don't really need, what would if it was just a higher megapixel, would that pull you up?
If it was a higher megapixel and didn't do anything else but that, probably no. I wouldn't. I don't think I would upgrade.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I can't say it until I see how many megapixels, because Canon already did their 50, and so if Nikon says, here's our 80 megapixel, then, I mean, I'm done. I'm going to max out every credit card no matter how much it costs, and I'm just going to do it. But if it's like a 50 megapixel and nothing else changes, or even if like the low light gets worse, I probably won't. Because whenever I kind of envision in my mind when I'm shooting when I want like a big print, and whenever I know I want a big print, I'll just do a quick like 3-shot sweep of panorama shots so that I can stitch 3 36 megapixel photos together and get this massive resolution shot.
If they went to 80 megapixel, can we record you editing those in Aurora?
I don't even want to think about it. That would literally eat up the entire hour web show time. We would just click align images, and we would be here for the entire night. Oh my gosh,
that'd be great.
Yeah,
we'll have to do like some sort of screen record that we can do of editing photos in Aurora.
Yeah,
just because people probably don't actually know how long it really does take to.
Yeah, we'll do that on our next episode. One of us will do a screen share.
Great.
Yeah, we'll do a screen share. We'll kick off the show with that, and we'll just drag some brackets in there and edit a photo, and it is just so bad.
Yeah,
so bad.
We both have fairly good computers. You've got the 5K, which is maxed out, and I've got a 15-inch Retina that's got pretty good stuff. And so it'd be doing that. Yeah,
it'd be because I thought ever since I got this computer, this is the fastest Mac I've ever owned, and this never had a problem with anything. It even runs Final Cut, editing 4K footage from the Phantom drone like a pro. But then I open up Aurora HDR and it just shuts everything down. So go figure. I don't know how that happened.
That's crazy.
Yep. All right. Is there anything else you want to cover before we wrap things up? Any other exciting stuff in the photo world?
Not that I can think of right now.
Good. All right, cool. Well, thank you everyone for watching our very first episode, and we will catch you next Wednesday for episode 2. Thanks for watching.
Peace.